Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather with us tonight. It's the 13th of March, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather service information. You can find us on social media at NWS Alaska on Facebook or NWS Juneau, NWS Anchorage, or NWS Fairbanks, and all of those same addresses will work on Twitter as well. So make sure you're following all those, and especially the new pages there. If you haven't localized your information just a little bit more, it's an easy way to do it. You can always call us. 1-800-472-0391 is an easy way to find us online at the Alaska Weather Information Line. Weather.gov/Alaska will always work. One more click will get you to your local information off the map. And if you still can't find what you need, whether it's from the aviation resources we have for you, the National Tsunami Warning Center, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and their ice thickness information for your rivers in the area, let me know. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is a very easy way to find me. Let's take a look at what's going on across your part of Alaska tonight. First of all, a front is moving across the Gulf right now, and because of that, a lot of wind is moving over southeast. As we head through the rest of the evening hours, we expect winds to come up sharply, especially around 6 to 7 o'clock for the outer parts of southern southeast and into Ketchikan and Annette and up toward Hyder as we get closer to about 7 o'clock, maybe up toward 10 o'clock, maybe a little bit later before that actually dies off. But we're talking about gusts up around 60 miles per hour for southern parts of southeast, so that does include Craig and Heidelberg, and then areas a little bit more into the inner channels there, like Ketchikan and Annette. So plan on some wind for your area, and again, gusts up to 60 miles per hour. Not the worst wind you've seen, but certainly one that has the potential to do some lower end damage. So make sure you're ready for that before that moves in a little bit later this evening, and maybe even right now as you're watching the show. A look a little bit further up towards Skagway tells us that the snow is going to be an issue. We expect to see snowfall rates picking up pretty quickly as we head to about midnight. You might see a real quick burst, and totals will be around 3 to 6 inches or so for this winter weather advisory. But once that tapers off a little bit, you may continue to see snow showers throughout Thursday morning. So just because that front comes through and conditions improve, there may still be some additional accumulations as we go through your Thursday morning. So winter weather advisory for you. And then out toward the eastern Alaska range, a wind advisory is posted, gusts up to about 40 to 45 miles per hour. They'll be the strongest through some of the passes. If you're driving up and down the highway there, you'll notice the winds blowing a little bit more. This is mainly going to be for tomorrow and then into Friday morning as that reaches its peak. The weather system here across South Central is still moving northward and really driving a lot of wind northward. So the worst of this will develop tomorrow and into Friday. So that's a wind advisory there. And then, of course, across the Arctic coast, we're still dealing with winter weather advisories, primarily for poor visibility due to blowing snow. Gusts there may reach 40 to 45 miles per hour at times. Really not expecting any additional snow for the western Arctic coast or the eastern Beaufort Sea coast at this point, but we do expect the poor visibility to linger through tonight and maybe into tomorrow morning before that starts to improve. Across the Bering Strait communities, we also expect to see maybe an additional inch of snow on top of what you've already seen. The upper Koyukuk Valley also expecting to see some poor visibility and blowing snow for your region, so plan on that if you're in the Ambler area. So a lot of changes there with the wind and the poor visibility and then additional snowfall as you head into southeast. Let's take a look at the weather picture. A real beauty here on the satellite view anyway. If you're underneath it, it's probably not so much. You can see this gorgeous spiraling shape here. That's low pressure in its truest form with some areas of convection or upward moving air here. Those are the bright white spots you see here, and also out in this drier zone of air on the inside of that, we see that bubbling of air taking shape and cooling off the cloud droplets and turning those into a very white color on the satellite's perspective, telling us that they're cooling off a lot as they get higher and higher into the atmosphere. So a lot of that moisture is wrapping around the Gulf, but with this boundary here also comes a lot of wind quickly wrapping into the spiraling shape. That's going to create some wind issues for the northern Gulf Coast and certainly for southern parts of southeast as it's swinging through. And it's also loading wind and moisture into the Kenai Mountains and the Chugach, and that represents an avalanche concern. So there are some high avalanche concerns today for the Chugach Mountains, especially around the Turnagain Pass area down at the road. More of a moderate concern, but certainly on the slopes that concern grows very, very quickly. So you'll probably hear me say this again through the rest of the show, but if you are going out with your sleds or doing any traveling or skiing this weekend in South Central, make sure you're checking in the Chugach Avalanche Information Center before you go out and check the warnings and at least know before you go, because conditions are going to be changing. This is a very wet and windy and snowy setup for for south central, especially in the mountains, and could be one that really enhances and exacerbates the avalanche danger where you're headed. So make sure you know what you're doing. For southeast, looks like a lot of wind moving through. You're going to see the frontal boundary work through tomorrow, or late tonight and tomorrow. And as that happens, you're going to see several waves probably of precipitation. It looks like it's pretty warm. Temperatures across the region shot into the 40s in some cases. Hyder jumped up into the lower 40s today, so some rain there. And also looking at some warmer temperatures across the northern end. So don't be surprised to see more of a rain and snow mix, if it's a mix at all, across northern parts of southeast. You'll see that reflected in our weather maps in a minute. Looking northward, we still have a decent easterly component feeding into the overall weather system here. So your winds are going to stay up around the western Arctic coast and the Beaufort Sea coast. And we're gradually getting into that colder flow across the Bering Strait as we go through the next couple days. Right now, a little bit more of an easterly component working over Norton Sound. Again, we've seen the ice pictures there. If you go to the Alaska Weather Sea Ice page, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice, and then click on the button that says Other Images, and you'll be able to see a really beautiful shot of Norton Sound yesterday that has just a trace amount of ice in there. Just a interesting picture to behold. Northwesterlies will continue flowing over parts of Bristol Bay, and then you can see our next weather system out across the west, already starting to build in clouds from the south and the west, heading toward Adak and Shemya. Here's the weather map. Low pressure sits at 970 this afternoon. Rain out ahead of that, moving into the outer coast. Drier weather and warmer weather for the inside passage today. The triple point there will start to focus more of that wind in southern southeast as we go through the rest of tonight. A frontal boundary lies across the Yukon Valley, connecting to low pressure across southwest at 985 millibars. We're seeing some snow-blown wind across parts of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain, and a little bit of a stronger pressure gradient across the north with areas of light snow for the Brooks Range. As we go through tonight, watch for low pressure to move closer to the Barrens at 982. We're looking at a trough of low pressure now, the dying front moving inland across the inside passages of southeast and over Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. This is going to help move a lot more wind and snow across the higher terrain, and rain, at times mixed with snow, across some of the lower terrain where you live. Across the interior, watch for a little bit of snow across the eastern Alaska Range, and just downwind from that a little bit. A better chance for wind developing in this region tomorrow and drying things out. Snow showers across the Bering Sea, around the Pribilofs, and also across the Bering Strait. Looking for low pressure to just kind of hover out here across the western Bering. South and west of the chain, we expect to see a 986 millibar low. They're deepening a little bit more as we head into Thursday afternoon, bringing a chance of snow showers to the central and western chain. Low pressure sits across the central and western Gulf at 977 millibars, representing another surge of warm and wet air that wants to move northward. You'll see that in a minute. And then all across the Gulf Coast through Thursday, periods of rain mixed with snow across northern southeast into Prince William Sound. Chances of snow continue for the Turnagain Pass and areas along the Kenai Mountains, and rain along Cook Inlet into Kodiak Island. Watch for snow across the Alaska Range, wind across the eastern Alaska Range, and snow moves northward toward Fort Yukon. As you look out west on Friday, snow showers continue up and down western Alaska. A better chance for accumulating snow to be generally light across Bristol Bay. And our warm and wet air moving northward, well, that's still there across the Gulf. A new front moves further closer to land at 978 millibars. Look at the tight gradient across the north and eastern Gulf Coast. More rain and warmth there, and more wind for south central. Let's take a look at your temperatures for tonight. For southeast, we expect to see temps above freezing for many locations in the Panhandle, upper 20s and lower 30s for south central, mid-teens for most of the Tanana Valley, north and west cooler into the single digits, 15 to 20 below for the North Slope, Nome 15, southwestern temperatures in the 20s to about 30s. We expect 30 or so around Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, above freezing there tomorrow, 24 in Nome, and temps in the mid to lower teens for the Slope, and 30s and 40s in south.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On your aviation weather report now, IFR conditions are going to spread in across the west coast into areas around Nome, out towards St. Lawrence Island, and all the way down the YK Delta into Bristol Bay. You'll also see the effects of low pressure sitting here across the northern Gulf overnight and early in the morning. We're still going to push a lot of low ceiling and poor visibility around Kodiak Island and the Resurrection Bay Gulf Coast, Kenai Fjords, and all the way into the Barren Islands. We're also expecting an area of instability that could produce some isolated thunderstorms generally behind the weather front that's moving towards southeast. Look for IFR ahead of that, especially over Juneau and all the way down toward Hyder and close to Ketchikan and Annette. The outer coast, a better chance of seeing MVFR. Some of that will improve as we go throughout the day. In fact, IFR conditions will start to shrink in coverage, generally north of Juneau and south of Haines and Skagway. Everywhere else in southeast has a much better chance of being marginal throughout your afternoon. Watch for some breaks in the overcast around Anchorage all the way down to just about Kenai, but south of that a much better chance for lower visibility and ceilings especially as we go through the day. That'll extend northward into the Susitna Valley and the Copper River Valley. North into the North Slope, generally around Kaktovik, IFR conditions are expected there in the afternoon. Most of the rest of their passes along the Brooks Range will be marginal at best. And then IFR conditions will continue around the Yukon Delta all the way down through Bethel and into Bristol Bay where conditions improve just a little bit. As we get into the afternoon, you'll see more breaks, for Friday morning, I should say, VFR conditions for southwest and develop around Bristol Bay. You'll notice a very large area of IFR across the Gulf, again, spreading into Prince William Sound all the way down past the Kenai Fjords and into Kodiak Island. Northern sections of southeast stand a chance of seeing IFR to start your Friday morning. Marginal conditions most likely elsewhere, but as you get into the afternoon, that's going to snake its way into southern parts of the Panhandle. IFR will be fairly widespread over the Gulf, Prince William Sound, into the Barrens and southern Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, and all of Kodiak Island. But you'll notice improvement across the interior, across the North Slope. Marginal conditions linger around Wainwright and Utqiagvik and around Kotzebue Sound, and then MVFR conditions through Etolan Strait, the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, and then patchy across the Aleutian Chain and the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Here's your pass conditions in detail now for your Thursday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions, as you saw, lingering really most over the Brooks Range throughout the day. Lake Clark and Mel Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions developing throughout the afternoon. Rainy Pass looks to be marginal at best throughout the day, and we'll see those kind of intermediate levels there for Windy Pass and on over to Isabel Pass as we go through Thursday. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see some improvement throughout your day, heading for VFR. Tanita Pass, though, probably lingers under that marginal level there throughout most of your Thursday. IFR conditions start in Portage. We should see some improvement there, hopefully in your Portage as well. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions there during the afternoon. Some start, though, probably closer to MVFR. The freezing levels that we saw yesterday, really pretty much the same. The surface freezing line has not changed very much along the southern outer coast. It jumps a little bit further north of Juneau there. Conditions are warming up a little bit as we head into Thursday. The 2,000-foot freezing line just south of Haida Gwaii. So it stands to reason that icing potential is a little more limited, and yeah, there's certainly a lot more moisture around, but that warm air is kind of pushing that level up there before you really get into the target zone for at least some ice growth there. So isolated moderate appears to be widespread, but look at the numbers, anywhere from 6 to 5,000 feet up north, 6, maybe 7,000 feet across the Gulf. So again, you've got a little bit of room to move across most areas there if ceiling and visibility aren't getting in your way. Here's a look at the jet stream and the main Pacific corridor of fast-moving winds roaring across the North Pacific at about 160 to 180 knots. Another corridor of fast-moving winds coming in from the west of the YK Delta around 65, and you can see our ridge is trying to shift a little bit to the east. That's really going to bring that southerly flow up right over the Gulf from the subtropics. At 9,000 feet, our southerly wind is in place. We have 35 to about 45 knots there, so look for plenty of clouds across the Gulf and into the interior because of that 15 to 30 across the interior. Easterly offshore flow over Kotzebue Sound and over the Seward Peninsula. That should help to drag in a little more colder air. And then low pressure here sitting around Nunivak Island with winds around 25 to 30. At 3,000 feet, our west and southwesterly flows coming inland there to southwestern Alaska. Wind speeds there over western Alaska around 25 to 30 knots. Easterlies across the North Slope, southerlies across the deep south and southwestern parts of Alaska and the Panhandle. 15 knots inland, but 55 to 60 offshore. So turbulence is a concern once again. Those southerly winds will create a widespread area around south central for considerable moderate and also across the interior just north of the Alaska Range, generally below 4,000 feet. Watch for some isolated turbulence there across the North Slope itself around Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound and also across the southern outer coast of southeast.
Hello, I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. I can see a lot of cool stuff from up here, and I take pictures of it with my spiffy camera that has 16 different settings. I have such good eyesight, I can see clouds, snow, smoke, smog, and ash, so I can warn you about dangerous conditions and help you avoid them. When storms are brewing, I watch them closely and help with hurricane, tornado, and flood warnings to help keep you safe. and my lightning mapper tracks lightning strikes way up in the sky, even through dark, dense clouds. I also help with search and rescue missions. I listen for distress signals from emergency beacons and tell search and rescue teams just where to find people who need help. But even when I'm keeping a close eye on Earth, I'm monitoring weather out here in space, too. I watch the sun for big bursts of energy, which send waves of radiation toward Earth that can affect power grids, block communication with planes, cause errors in GPS, and damage satellites. Space weather is also very dangerous for astronauts working outside the International Space Station. I warn them so they can get inside where they'll be safe. So the next time you watch a weather report or check your phone for the forecast, remember, that's me. So look to the sky and wave. I'll be here. Whoa! Things are looking pretty bad down there. But don't worry. I'm going to give weather forecasters a heads up and help you stay safe. I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite, and one of my jobs is to keep an eye on Earth's weather as I orbit above. But I'm 22,000 miles above Earth. How does your local weather forecaster know what I see all the way up here? First, I have to figure out what's going on. I point my special camera at the Earth and take pictures of the clouds I see below. My pictures show where the clouds are, but I also take lots of other notes about the clouds. For example, how high they reach into the atmosphere, how much rain they might cause, and when a severe storm may be forming. But I can't keep all of this information to myself. I have to share it with weather forecasters down on Earth. A big antenna is waiting for my call. Since I'm a satellite, I send my pictures and notes in a computer language of ones and zeros. Luckily, the antenna speaks my language. Computers connected to the antenna organize my notes and combine all of the pictures and cloud information and translate them into weather maps. They send a version of the maps back up to me. I'll hold on to these for later. Another copy of the maps is split into smaller pieces. This helps the maps move faster from one place to another. The map pieces are then sent for processing before being sent back up in the sky to a communication satellite. From there, the maps are picked up by antennas at the National Weather Service forecast offices in each region. There are more than 100 offices. I also take the maps that I received and send them out to companies that specialize in making the maps more colorful and better for viewing on TVs and computers. The colorful maps and the maps from the forecast offices then go to your local weather forecaster. The forecaster combines the information from these maps with lots of other information, like model forecast data and radar data, to make predictions about the upcoming weather in your area. And that's how I help you find out if bad weather is going to ruin your afternoon plans. You're welcome. Soon it will be my time to shine in outer space. I'm the GOES-R satellite. That stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. And the R stands for my order in this series of weather satellites. Like my older siblings before me, I'll do a lot for watching weather, but I'm pretty special because I have a lot of new gadgets. I'm originally from Colorado, but my journey to space has a few stops along the way. I'll be shipped in a very special satellite shipping container to Kennedy Space Center. Moving me around is not easy. I'm over 18 feet wide and weigh 6,000 pounds. And then things get really exciting. I get loaded onto an Atlas V541 launch vehicle. A big rocket! Woo! After Atlas and I blast off together, my compartment separates from the launch vehicle and I continue to climb higher and higher. Then I break away completely and unfurl my solar panel and antenna. After that, I have to use my thrusters to get into just the right position, 22,000 miles above the ground and traveling 1.9 miles per second to keep up with Earth's rotation. And then I can officially start my job along with my fellow GOES sisters, where I take advanced pictures for more accurate weather forecasts, map lightning in real time, and improve the monitoring of the sun's activity. It's going to be so awesome! I can't wait!
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice update. As we were talking about yesterday, and as you can still see on the Alaska Sea Ice Program's page, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice, you see the link there at the top of your screen. A lot of this has very low concentration ice across Norton Sound, and we saw that a lot of that ice had moved away from the northern coastline of Norton Sound. There's still a little bit of ice there, and it's a very thin kind of wavy, wobbly strip across the northern end. And if you want to see that high-res picture, I encourage you to check that out. Just go to the other images there on that website. But most of this has a lot of open water right now, so it is marginal, but there's an awful lot of open water. It's not sea ice free, but certainly very open. We are seeing some minimal new ice growth out to the west, and we expect to see a little bit of that starting to work in from west to east across Norton Sound in the coming days there. So still on track with the current prediction there. This is the latest image as of March 13. As we look at southeast, we expect to see gusty winds in Stevens Passage, gusts to 35 knots there with 4-foot seas, 5-foot seas with southerly winds across the northern Lynn Canal, 25 knots there, and also in Clarence Strait with a 7-foot sea. Generally south and southwesterly onshore flow for the outer coast up toward Yakutat, 20 knots with a 16-foot sea, and that becomes more of a southeasterly push wrapping around low pressure in the central Gulf with higher winds and seas out across the open waters. On the inside passage, 15 to 25 with 3 to 6-foot seas. Gusts in Clarence Strait could come up to about 35 knots. Watch for 16 to 17-foot seas across the outer coast south of Sitka and 18 to 19-foot seas north of Cross Sound up toward Yakutat for your day on Friday. For Thursday in Prince William Sound, we expect southeasterlies, 30 knots and 7-foot seas. There, a broad southerly flow coming into the outer coast there in the north and western Gulf. For the Barrens, westerlies moving into the western Barrens, 25 knots, 8-foot seas there, and also looking for 8-footers across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet region with a stronger northeasterly gradient from Kenai south toward Homer with an 11-foot sea there on Thursday. Not a whole lot of improvement on Friday. Northerlies still strong through Cook Inlet. Over the Barren Islands, 30 to 35, 12 to 16-foot seas there. Southeasterly, strong gales outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance, 35 to 40 knots with 17 to 18-foot seas, and 30 knots from the east in Prince William Sound on Friday with a 7-foot sea there. For Bristol Bay, westerlies still pushing in, a 7 to 8-foot sea on the Bering Sea coast. You can see the Pacific coast looking at 8 to 11-foot seas, maybe 13-foot seas east of Kodiak Island. Southwesterlies across Shelikof Strait, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. And as we get into Friday, winds come in a little bit stronger from the north through Shelikof Strait, Pacific coast, and then really diminish and fall off from Bristol Bay down toward Cold Bay on the Bering Sea coast side, 3 to 4-foot seas there. We'll keep an easterly flow, though, coming into Kodiak Island with 20 knots and 14-foot seas, all pushing away from low pressure sitting across the central Gulf. For the chain, maybe a little bit more of a walk in the park at this point. 15 to 20 knots for many areas. You're looking at about 5 to 6 foot seas for most of the central and eastern chain, 8 to 9 foot seas out in the west, and you'll see a few spots south of the chain holding around 8 feet there for the coastal areas. For Friday, winds pick up a little bit more in the west. You'll notice the central and eastern chain still 10 to 15, 5 to 7 foot seas in most areas, and a little bit more of a north and easterly flow developing from Atka out toward Kiska. 9 foot seas out toward Kiska, in fact, with that northerly wind and more of a northwesterly shift starting to take shape from Kiska to Shemya on Friday. For the west coast, north and easterly winds coming out of Norton Sound over Nunivak Island and into the Kuskokwim Delta, about 15 to 25 in most areas. 6 foot seas around St. Paul and St. George out toward St. Matthew. And as we get into Friday, winds diminish even more around St. Paul and St. George. Southwesterlies coming into the Kuskokwim Delta with 5 foot seas there, and southerlies coming up from Nunivak Island toward St. Lawrence Island and into Norton Sound. So that could push some of that very loose ice and marginal ice a little bit closer to the southern coast. So once again, be careful on the shorefast ice, as it is likely unstable in that region. The east and northeasterly winds for the Beaufort and Chukchi coast hold around 25 to 30 knots. That's going to keep snow blowing around and might keep visibility poor in your area. We don't see a whole lot of change as we go through Friday. Easterlies continue for the Beaufort Seacoast and an east and northeasterly flow for Kotzebue Sound and the Chukchi coast as we go toward the end of the week. Recapping tonight's weather, we have a high wind warning for southern parts of southeast, including Ketchikan and Heidelberg. We expect to see winds probably peaking this afternoon, this evening, and then diminishing quickly after midnight. A winter weather advisory for the Skagway area in the Klondike Highway, 3 to 6 inches possible there. You'll continue to see snow showers into tomorrow. For the eastern Alaska range, a wind advisory for gusts 40 to 45, mainly through the passes tonight for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, the western Arctic coast, and the Bering Strait communities. We expect to see winter weather advisories continue there, mainly for poor visibility, and avalanche danger remains high across South Central's mountains. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.